The morning sun cast long shadows across the training grounds at Camp Pendleton as Staff Sergeant Marcus Rivera adjusted his Kevlar vest one final time. The joint military exercise with the Galactic Coalition had been months in the planning, and today marked the first official combat demonstration between Earth's finest and the so-called elite forces of the galaxy. Rivera had seen the alien warriors arrive 3 days ago in their sleek, chrome vessels that hummed with energy fields beyond human understanding. The Zephyrian Galactic troopers stood nearly 8 feet tall, their exoskeletons gleaming with integrated weaponry that could supposedly level city blocks. Their leader, Commander Thaxmore, had made it clear through the translators that this exercise was merely a formality, a way to assess primitive human capabilities, before Earth's inevitable integration into their empire. The other Marines in Rivera's unit had been unusually quiet during the briefing. These weren't fresh recruits. They were battle-hardened veterans who had served in the worst hellholes on Earth. Corporal Johnson, who had 3 tours in Afghanistan under his belt, kept cleaning his M4 carbine with mechanical precision. Private First Class Chen, a former street fighter from Detroit, shadowboxed near the equipment racks. Sergeant Williams, the unit's sniper, methodically checked his scope adjustments for the dozenth time. "Remember, gentlemen," Rivera addressed his squad of 12 Marines. "This is supposed to be a friendly demonstration, but I've been watching these aliens train for 3 days, and friendly isn't the word I'd use." He paused, studying each face. "They think we're primitives. They think our weapons are toys and our tactics are crude. They're about to learn why humans have been killing each other so efficiently for thousands of years." The Zephyrian combat doctrine relied heavily on their technological superiority. Their plasma rifles could punch through tank armor, their personal shields could deflect most projectile weapons, and their enhanced physiology made them faster and stronger than baseline humans. What they hadn't accounted for was the particular brand of creativity that came from a species that had spent millennia perfecting the art of warfare with limited resources. As the two forces took their positions on opposite ends of the training ground, Rivera noticed something in Commander Thaxmore's posture, arrogance so complete it bordered on contempt. The alien commander had brought only 6 troopers for the exercise, confident that their superior technology would easily overwhelm the 12 primitive humans facing them. The rules were simple: capture the flag simulation using non-lethal training rounds. The Zephyrians had insisted on using their own training weapons, which could supposedly incapacitate without permanent damage. The Marines would use modified paintball rounds that could register hits on the aliens' armor sensors. When the klaxon sounded to begin the exercise, the Galactic troopers moved with fluid precision, their anti-gravity boots allowing them to bound across the terrain in impossible leaps. Their formation was textbook perfect, advancing in a disciplined line while laying down suppressing fire with their energy weapons. Rivera smiled grimly as he watched them approach. Perfect formations worked well against enemies who fought by the same rules. But Marines had learned long ago that rules were suggestions, and survival meant throwing the playbook out the window when necessary. "Johnson, Chen, you're with me. Williams, get to that ridge and start making their lives difficult. First and second fire teams flank left and right. Third team, stay in reserve and watch for my signal." Rivera's orders were calm, almost conversational, but each Marine knew exactly what to do. The Zephyrians had expected the humans to either charge directly into their superior firepower or attempt to hold defensive positions where their technology could overwhelm any resistance. They hadn't expected the humans to simply vanish. Within 30 seconds of the engagement beginning, the Marines had scattered like smoke, using every piece of cover, every dip in the terrain, every shadow to break up their profiles. Years of fighting insurgents who could hide in plain sight had taught them lessons that no amount of technology could counter. Commander Thaxmore's confidence wavered slightly as his heads-up display showed no clear targets. The humans had somehow disappeared into terrain that his scanners said should provide insufficient concealment. His troops began advancing more cautiously, their energy weapons sweeping left and right as they searched for enemies that seemed to have evaporated. The first casualty came from an impossible angle. Sergeant Williams had somehow made it to a position that the Zephyrian tactical computers said was unreachable in the available time. His shot took down the leftmost trooper with a paintball round that struck the weak point where the alien's helmet met his shoulder armor, a target barely 2 inches wide at 400 meters. Before the aliens could react to the sniper fire, Rivera and his team struck from 3 different directions simultaneously. They had crawled through ditches, used smoke grenades to mask their movement, and approached to within 50 meters of the alien formation without being detected. The Zephyrians found themselves caught in a crossfire that exploited every gap in their defensive formation. Their shields were designed to stop frontal assaults, not attacks from multiple angles at close range. Marines popped up from concealment, took their shots, and disappeared again before return fire could find them. Corporal Johnson had somehow gotten behind the alien formation entirely, having crawled through a drainage culvert that didn't appear on any of the provided maps. His assault from the rear sent 2 more Galactic troopers to the casualty collection point, their armor's sensors registering fatal hits. Commander Thaxmore realized with growing alarm that his numerically inferior, technologically primitive opponents were systematically dismantling his unit. Their weapons might be less powerful, but their tactics were unlike anything in the Galactic Coalition's extensive military databases. Private Chen emerged from a pile of debris that the aliens had dismissed as impassable terrain, his weapon chattering as he laid down suppressing fire that forced the remaining Zephyrians to break formation. In the confusion, Rivera's reserve team moved forward, their approach masked by the chaos of battle. The exercise that was supposed to demonstrate human inferiority was rapidly becoming a masterclass in asymmetric warfare. The Galactic troopers, for all their advanced technology, had never faced an enemy that refused to fight according to established doctrine. As the simulation continued, it became clear that the humans weren't just winning, they were dominating. Every advantage the aliens possessed was being turned against them through tactics that combined centuries of human military experience with an intimate knowledge of how to fight a technologically superior enemy. The observers from both sides watched in stunned silence as Earth's Marines systematically outmaneuvered, outfought, and outthought the galaxy's supposedly elite warriors. The silence that followed the end of the exercise was more deafening than any explosion. Commander Thaxmore stood motionless, his advanced tactical computer still processing what had just occurred. In 17 minutes and 32 seconds, his elite Galactic troopers had been completely eliminated by a force they had dismissed as primitive savages armed with crude kinetic weapons. The alien commander's exoskeleton registered elevated stress hormones as he watched the 12 human Marines emerge from positions that his scanners had declared impossible to reach. They moved with casual confidence, checking their weapons and equipment with the practiced ease of professionals who had just completed a routine training exercise. There was no celebration, no boasting, just the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. General Patricia Hawkins, the ranking human officer overseeing the exercise, maintained her professional demeanor as she approached the stunned Zephyrian forces. Her 40 years of military service had taught her to read the subtle signs of an enemy's psychological state, and what she saw in the aliens' body language told her everything she needed to know about their current mindset. "Commander Thaxmore," she said through the translation device, her tone neutral and respectful, "I trust the exercise met your expectations for evaluating human military capabilities?" The alien commander's vocal translator struggled to convey the complex mixture of emotions in his response. This outcome was not anticipated by our tactical projections. Our combat algorithms predicted a decisive victory within the first 5 minutes of engagement. Staff Sergeant Rivera approached the group, his M4 carbine slung casually across his chest. His uniform was dirty from crawling through ditches and debris, but his eyes held the steady confidence of a warrior who had just proven his worth against supposedly superior opponents. "With respect, sir," Rivera addressed the alien commander, "your algorithms probably work fine against enemies who fight the way you expect them to, but humans have been killing each other with rocks and sticks for a lot longer than we've had energy weapons and force fields." The implications of Rivera's words weren't lost on the assembled aliens. While the Galactic Coalition had spent millennia developing increasingly sophisticated weapons and defensive systems, they had grown comfortable fighting enemies who relied on similar technologies and tactics. They had forgotten the brutal lessons that came from fighting for survival against desperate, resourceful opponents. Dr. Sarah Vance, the xenobiologist assigned to the Cultural Exchange Program, stepped forward with her datapad displaying the exercise statistics. Commander, if I may point out some interesting observations from our analysis. Your troops moved in textbook formations that would be highly effective against conventional forces. However, our Marines identified and exploited 17 different tactical vulnerabilities in your approach within the first 3 minutes of engagement. Commander Thaxmore's auxiliary eyes focused on the data streaming across his helmet display. The human analysis was comprehensive and disturbingly accurate. They had catalogued every weakness in Zephyrian doctrine with clinical precision. Your energy shields, Dr. Breyer, Vance continued, are designed to deflect high-velocity projectiles from a frontal arc. Our troops simply attacked from angles and distances where the shields were least effective. Your anti-gravity movement systems provide excellent mobility, but create predictable flight paths that our sniper could calculate and intercept. The alien commander found himself studying the humans with new eyes. These weren't the primitive warmongers his briefings had described. They were strategic thinkers who had analyzed Zephyrian capabilities and developed countermeasures with frightening efficiency. Corporal Johnson, who had been responsible for the devastating flanking maneuver, spoke up with characteristic Marine bluntness. Sir, we've been fighting each other for so long that we've learned to look for weaknesses in everything. Your tech is impressive, but it's built by engineers who think in straight lines. Combat doesn't happen in straight lines. General Hawkins gestured toward the training ground where the exercise had taken place. Commander, would you like to review the tactical recordings? I think you'll find our approach to warfare educational. The next hour was perhaps the most humbling experience in Commander Thaxmore's distinguished military career. The human tactical recordings revealed a level of battlefield awareness and adaptability that challenged everything the Galactic Coalition believed about primitive civilizations. The Marines had identified weak points in Zephyrian equipment that even their own manufacturers hadn't recognized. They had exploited gaps in alien doctrine that had gone unnoticed for centuries. Most disturbing of all, they had done it with weapons and equipment that were technically inferior by every measurable standard. Your species, Commander Thaxmore finally said, his translator barely managing to convey his confusion, has not achieved faster than light travel. Your weapons cannot penetrate starship armor. Your computers operate on primitive silicon-based processors. By every metric we use to measure military capability, you should be harmless. Rivera allowed himself a slight smile. Commander, we've been fighting wars since before we had metal weapons. We've learned that the most dangerous enemy isn't the one with the biggest gun. It's the one who's willing to use whatever he has in ways you don't expect. The xenobiologist Dr. Vance added her observations to the discussion. Commander, human warfare has been shaped by resource scarcity and technological limitations. We've learned to maximize the effectiveness of inferior equipment through superior tactics and training. Your species appears to have followed the opposite path, developing superior technology while allowing tactical doctrine to stagnate. As the day progressed, more Zephyrian officers arrived to review the exercise recordings. Each viewing session produced the same result: stunned silence followed by intensive questioning about human military doctrine. The aliens were beginning to understand that technological superiority meant nothing if the enemy refused to fight on your terms. Captain Morrison, the Marine intelligence officer, provided a sobering assessment during the debriefing. Gentlemen, this exercise demonstrates a fundamental weakness in Galactic Coalition military thinking. You've been fighting the same way for so long that you've forgotten how to adapt to new threats. The Zephyrian strategic computers were working overtime, recalculating threat assessments and tactical projections based on the new data about human capabilities. Every simulation they ran produced the same disturbing result. In a prolonged conflict with humanity, superior technology alone would not guarantee victory. Commander Thaxmore realized that his mission to Earth had just become far more complicated than anyone had anticipated. The humans weren't primitive savages waiting to be absorbed into the Galactic Coalition. They were a potential threat that could disrupt the established order of the galaxy. As the sun set over Camp Pendleton, the alien commander filed his report to Coalition Command with growing unease. The primitive humans had just taught the galaxy's elite warriors a lesson in humility that would resonate throughout the known universe. The encrypted transmission from Earth, reached the Galactic Coalition High Command 72 hours later, and its content sent shockwaves through the carefully ordered hierarchy of the galaxy's most powerful military organization. Admiral Kethran, Supreme Commander of Coalition Forces, read Commander Thaxamor's report 3 times before calling an emergency session of the War Council. The holographic chamber aboard the Coalition flagship Eternal Dominion flickered to life as military leaders from across the galaxy materialized around the circular table. Representatives from 12 different species, each commanding fleets that had conquered hundreds of worlds, gathered to discuss what should have been a routine evaluation of a primitive backwater planet. "Gentlemen," Admiral Kethran began, his 4 eyes scanning the assembled officers, "we have a problem. The humans of Earth have demonstrated military capabilities that do not align with our previous assessments of their technological development." General Vextar of the Hegemony Assault Corps, a species known for their brutal efficiency and planetary conquests, leaned forward with interest. His scarred carapace bore the marks of 50 successful campaigns. "Admiral, surely you're not suggesting that these primitives pose a genuine threat to Coalition forces?" Admiral Kethran activated the holographic display, showing the tactical recordings from the Earth exercise. "I'm suggesting that we may have fundamentally misunderstood what makes a species militarily effective. Watch these recordings and tell me if you still consider the humans primitive." The next 20 minutes passed in growing silence as the galaxy's finest military minds watched 12 human Marines systematically dismantle what should have been an overwhelmingly superior force. The tactical innovation displayed by the humans challenged centuries of established Coalition doctrine. Commander Sarthek of the Void Raiders, whose species had perfected orbital bombardment to an art form, spoke first. "Their equipment is clearly inferior. Those kinetic weapons shouldn't even register on our defensive systems." "Yet they won," Admiral Kethran replied quietly. "They didn't just win, they dominated. Our forces were eliminated with an efficiency that suggests the humans were operating well within their capabilities." The assembled officers began requesting detailed analysis of human tactics. What they discovered disturbed them more than any technological surprise could have. The humans had demonstrated a level of tactical flexibility that the Coalition had never encountered. They had adapted to their opponents' capabilities in real time, identifying and exploiting weaknesses that even the Zephyrians themselves didn't know existed. Dr. Quintel, the Coalition's leading military strategist, provided a chilling assessment. "Based on these recordings, I believe we're observing a species that has evolved in a constant state of warfare. Their tactical doctrine isn't based on technological superiority. It's based on defeating superior opponents through innovation and adaptability." The implications were staggering. The Galactic Coalition had spent millennia conquering worlds by bringing overwhelming technological force to bear against less advanced civilizations. They had never faced an enemy that could neutralize their advantages through pure tactical superiority. General Morgax of the Titan Corps raised the question that everyone was thinking. "Admiral, are you recommending that we delay the integration of Earth into the Coalition?" Admiral Kethran's response was measured but firm. "I'm recommending that we completely reevaluate our approach to humanity." The original plan called for a show of force followed by peaceful annexation. These recordings suggest that such an approach could result in significant Coalition casualties. The War Council spent the next 6 hours analyzing every aspect of the Earth exercise. They studied human military history, examined their weapons technology, and attempted to understand how a species armed with chemical, propellants and metal projectiles could pose a threat to forces equipped with energy, weapons and force fields. What they discovered painted a picture of a species that had never known peace. While Coalition worlds had enjoyed centuries of stability under galactic governance, humanity had spent the same period engaged in increasingly sophisticated warfare against itself. Every major technological advancement had been immediately weaponized. Every tactical innovation had been tested in actual combat. Commander Thaxamor's supplemental reports provided even more disturbing intelligence. The Marines who had participated in the exercise represented a tiny fraction of Earth's military capability. The planet maintained multiple independent military forces, each with distinct tactical doctrines and specialized capabilities. Some human militaries focused on conventional warfare, others on guerrilla tactics, and still others on specialized operations that defied classification. "They're not just warriors," Dr. Quintel observed after reviewing the cultural data. They're a species of professional warriors. Every advancement in their civilization has been shaped by the need to fight more effectively against other humans. The strategic computers began running projections for a potential military confrontation with Earth. The results were sobering. While coalition forces would ultimately prevail through sheer numerical superiority, the cost would be unprecedented. Human resistance could potentially destroy entire coalition fleets before being overwhelmed. Admiral Kethron made a decision that would reshape galactic politics for generations to come. We're going to approach Earth as equals, not as subjects. I want a diplomatic mission prepared immediately. The other commanders erupted in protests. General Vextar's voice rose above the others. Admiral, the coalition doesn't negotiate with primitive worlds. We've maintained galactic order for 3,000 years by demonstrating our overwhelming superiority. And in 3,000 years, Admiral Kethron replied, we've never encountered anything like humanity. These beings have taken the science of warfare and elevated it to an art form. They've done more with primitive technology than most species accomplish with our most advanced systems. The debate that followed would later be remembered as a turning point in galactic history. For the first time, the Galactic Coalition was forced to acknowledge that technological superiority wasn't the only measure of military effectiveness. The humans had demonstrated something far more dangerous than advanced weapons. They had shown the galaxy what happened when intelligent beings spent thousands of years learning to kill each other efficiently. Dr. Quintel provided the final argument that convinced the War Council. Gentlemen, consider this. If humans can achieve this level of tactical effectiveness with primitive weapons, what could they accomplish if they had access to our technology? The silence that followed that question was profound. Every officer in the chamber was imagining the same terrifying scenario: human tactical innovation combined with coalition technology. It was a combination that could potentially challenge the established order of the entire galaxy. Admiral Kethron's final orders were unprecedented in coalition history. We're suspending all military action against Earth pending diplomatic contact. I want our best negotiators preparing for discussions with a species that has just proven they can defeat our forces despite being technologically inferior. As the War Council dispersed, each member carried with them a new understanding of what they faced. The humans weren't just another primitive species to be absorbed into the coalition. They were a force that could potentially reshape the galaxy itself. Ambassador Velthari had negotiated the peaceful surrender of 47 worlds during her distinguished diplomatic career. But as her shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere, she felt a nervousness that hadn't plagued her in centuries. The tactical recordings from the Marine exercise had fundamentally altered the coalition's understanding of human capabilities. And her mission briefing had made it clear that failure could have consequences far beyond this single world. The diplomatic convoy that met her at Joint Base Andrews represented a careful balance of military presence and civilian authority. General Hawkins stood alongside Secretary of State Michael Chen, both flanked by Marine guards whose casual alertness spoke volumes about their recent encounter with Galactic Coalition forces. Ambassador Velthari noted that the human soldiers carried the same primitive kinetic weapons that had proven so effective against Zephyrian technology. Ambassador Velthari, Secretary Chen said through the translation device, welcome to Earth, we understand. You've come to discuss our planet's potential relationship with the Galactic Coalition. The Zephyrian diplomat's training had prepared her for negotiations with conquered peoples, not with equals who had demonstrated their military effectiveness. Secretary Chen, I come seeking to establish diplomatic relations between our peoples. Recent events have shown that humanity possesses unique capabilities that could benefit both our civilizations. As the convoy moved toward Washington, D.C., Ambassador Velthari observed the human capital with new eyes. The city bustled with activity that spoke of a complex, organized society. Military aircraft patrolled the skies with practiced efficiency, while civilian traffic flowed in patterns that suggested sophisticated coordination systems. This wasn't the primitive settlement she had expected to find. The meeting room in the Pentagon had been specifically chosen for its psychological impact. Maps of human military actions throughout history covered the walls, while display cases showed the evolution of human weapons from stone axes to modern assault rifles. The message was subtle but clear. Humanity had been perfecting the art of warfare for millennia. Ambassador, General Hawkins began once the formal introductions were complete. We've had some time to analyze the capabilities your forces demonstrated during our recent exercise. Your technology is impressive, but we notice some areas where our tactical approaches might complement your strategic objectives. Ambassador, Velthari's diplomatic training had taught her to recognize when she was being politely threatened, and the General's words carried unmistakable implications. General, the Coalition has always welcomed the unique contributions of member species. What specific areas did you have in mind? Dr. Sarah Vance presented a comprehensive analysis that left the alien diplomat struggling to maintain her composure. The humans had not only identified weaknesses in Coalition military doctrine, but had developed detailed countermeasures for their most advanced technologies. Energy shields could be overwhelmed by coordinated attacks from multiple angles. Anti-gravity systems created predictable movement patterns that could be exploited by patient snipers. Even their most sophisticated tactical computers relied on algorithms that could be manipulated by opponents who refused to fight according to established patterns. Your Coalition forces, Dr. Vance explained, have become victims of their own success. Thousands of years of technological superiority have created a military culture that relies on overwhelming force rather than tactical innovation. Human forces have learned to defeat superior opponents because we've never had the luxury of overwhelming technological advantages. Secretary Chen leaned forward, his expression serious but not hostile. Ambassador, we appreciate the Coalition's interest in peaceful integration, but we need to understand exactly what that means for Earth's sovereignty and military independence. The question struck at the heart of Ambassador Velthari's dilemma. Standard Coalition integration involved the absorption of planetary defense forces into the larger galactic military structure. Local governments maintained autonomy over civilian affairs, but surrendered military authority to Coalition command. However, the tactical recordings had made it clear that human military forces represented a potential threat that couldn't simply be absorbed or disbanded. The Coalition, she replied carefully, has always respected the unique characteristics of member worlds. We would naturally want to incorporate human tactical expertise into our broader strategic framework. General Hawkins smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. Ambassador, with respect, I don't think you understand what you're asking. Our tactical expertise isn't just a collection of techniques that can be transferred to your forces. It's the product of a civilization that has spent its entire existence learning to fight against impossible odds. The General activated a holographic display showing human military history, battles where outnumbered forces had achieved victory through innovation and determination. Campaigns where technologically inferior armies had defeated supposedly invincible opponents. Conflicts where human tactical flexibility had overcome every advantage except sheer willpower. We've been fighting each other for so long, General Hawkins continued. That warfare has become part of our cultural DNA. Every human military force has learned to assume they'll be outgunned and outnumbered. We've developed tactics specifically designed to defeat enemies with superior technology. Ambassador Velthari realized that she was witnessing something unprecedented in Coalition history. The humans weren't asking to join the galactic community. They were negotiating from a position of strength despite their technological disadvantages. They had demonstrated that military effectiveness wasn't just about having the most advanced weapons. It was about knowing how to use whatever weapons you had more effectively than your enemies. Secretary Chen presented the terms that would reshape galactic diplomacy. The United States, representing Earth's major powers, is prepared to enter into a mutual defense treaty with the Galactic Coalition. We'll share our tactical knowledge and training methodologies in exchange for access to Coalition technology and trade networks. However, Earth's military forces will remain under human command and control. The proposal was revolutionary. No species in Coalition history had been offered equal partnership rather than integration. The implications extended far beyond Earth itself. Other Coalition worlds might begin questioning the traditional model of galactic governance. I'll need to consult with Coalition Command, Ambassador Velthari said, already knowing what their response would be. The War Council had explicitly authorized her to negotiate from a position that acknowledged human military capabilities. Dr. Vance added a final element that sealed the agreement's importance. Ambassador, our preliminary analysis suggests that coalition technology could enhance human tactical effectiveness by several orders of magnitude. Energy weapons that can be fired from concealed positions, personal shields that protect soldiers during flanking maneuvers, communication systems that coordinate complex operations across vast distances. The unspoken threat was clear. Humans armed with coalition technology would become exponentially more dangerous than humans armed with primitive kinetic weapons. If the galaxy's military balance was already shifting due to human tactical innovation, giving them access to advanced technology could tip the scales entirely. Ambassador Velthari made a decision that would be debated by galactic historians for centuries. Secretary Chen, General Hawkins, I believe we can reach an accommodation that serves both our people's interests. The coalition is prepared to offer Earth Associate membership with full military autonomy. As the formal agreements were signed, both sides understood that they were witnessing the birth of a new era in galactic politics. Humanity had earned its place among the stars not through technological achievement, but through the oldest and most fundamental skill in the universe, the ability to fight and win against overwhelming odds. 6 months after the signing of the Terra Accords, the first joint human coalition military exercise took place in the Kepler 442 system, and the results exceeded everyone's expectations while simultaneously terrifying coalition command. Staff, Sergeant Marcus Rivera, now wearing an experimental combat suit that merged human design philosophy with alien technology, stood on the bridge of the coalition starship Infinite Resolve, watching tactical displays that would have been science fiction mere months earlier. The joint exercise pitted a combined human-alien force against simulated hegemony raiders, the coalition's primary external threat for the past 3 centuries. The hegemony represented everything the coalition had learned to fight against. Overwhelming numbers, brutal tactics, and complete disregard for civilian casualties. For 300 years, coalition forces had maintained a defensive stalemate against hegemony expansion through superior technology and disciplined formations. Captain Morrison, now serving as tactical liaison between human and coalition forces, studied the enemy deployment with the intensity that had made him legendary among Marine intelligence officers. Admiral Kethran, their formation is textbook hegemony, massed assault with heavy support units designed to overwhelm fixed defensive positions. Admiral Kethran nodded, his 4 eyes focusing on the tactical display. Our standard response would be to establish overlapping fields of fire and rely on our energy shields to absorb their initial assault. Coalition doctrine has proven effective against this type of attack for centuries. Rivera allowed himself a slight smile as he studied the enemy positions. Admiral, with respect, coalition doctrine assumes you're fighting an enemy that plays by the same rules you do. The hegemony has been using the same tactics against you for 300 years because they work. Maybe it's time to try something different. The human sergeant's confidence would have seemed absurd 6 months earlier, but the intervening period had fundamentally altered coalition perceptions of human military capability. Joint training exercises had demonstrated that human tactical innovations could transform even routine operations into masterpieces of military efficiency. Dr. Vance, now serving as the primary liaison for human coalition technological integration, highlighted the key differences in their respective approaches. Admiral, coalition forces have traditionally relied on superior defensive positions and overwhelming firepower. Human doctrine emphasizes mobility, deception, and attacking enemy weaknesses rather than strengths. The plan that emerged from the joint tactical session would have been considered madness by traditional coalition standards. Instead of establishing defensive positions and waiting for the hegemony assault, the combined force would split into multiple independent units and attack the enemy from directions they couldn't possibly expect. Commander Thaxmore, whose humbling experience at Camp Pendleton had led to his appointment as head of human-alien tactical integration, presented the operational outline. We'll use coalition stealth technology to deploy human units behind enemy lines. While they create chaos in the hegemony rear areas, our main force will execute a frontal assault that violates every principle of their defensive planning. The beauty of the plan lay in its complete rejection of established military doctrine. The hegemony had spent centuries learning to counter coalition tactics, but they had no experience fighting an enemy that combined alien technology with human innovation. Marine Gunnery Sergeant Williams, now equipped with a sniper rifle that fired coherent energy beams instead of bullets, took his position on an asteroid that shouldn't have been reachable by any known transportation method. Coalition teleportation technology, originally designed for emergency evacuation, had been repurposed to deploy human snipers in impossible locations. Target acquired, Williams reported over the communication network. Hegemony command ship, range 40,000 kilometers. They have no idea we're here. The opening moments of the battle demonstrated the devastating effectiveness of human coalition cooperation. While hegemony forces prepared to repel a traditional frontal assault, human units materialized throughout their formation using coalition transport technology. The psychological impact was immediate and overwhelming. Corporal Johnson, leading a squad of Marines equipped with coalition personal shields and energy weapons, struck the enemy supply depot with surgical precision. Package delivered. Enemy logistics are officially FUBAR. The hegemony commanders found themselves fighting a completely unfamiliar type of warfare. Their formations, designed to counter coalition energy weapons, were vulnerable to human tactics that emphasized mobility and surprise. Their communication networks, hardened against traditional electronic warfare, couldn't cope with human infiltration techniques that relied on physical penetration rather than technological superiority. Private Chen, now wearing armor that made him effectively invisible to most sensor systems, provided real-time intelligence from inside the hegemony flagship. Multiple targets identified. Their command structure is completely centralized. Take out the flagship and the whole fleet loses coordination. Admiral Catherine watched in fascination as human Marines systematically dismantled an enemy formation that had stalemated coalition forces for decades. The hegemony's numerical superiority meant nothing when their command and control systems were being attacked by soldiers they couldn't detect or track. The decisive moment came when Rivera's unit, transported directly onto the hegemony flagship by coalition matter transmission, captured the enemy command center in an operation that took less than 4 minutes. Traditional coalition boarding. Actions required hours of cutting through reinforced hulls. Human Marines simply materialized inside the ship and overwhelmed the defenders before they could react. Admiral, Rivera reported from the captured bridge, hegemony command and control is secured. Their fleet is requesting surrender terms. The aftermath of the exercise sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. A hegemony fleet that should have required a full coalition task force to defeat had been neutralized by a small joint unit in less than 2 hours. The tactical recordings were classified at the highest levels, but word of the operation's success spread through military channels like wildfire. General Hawkins, observing the exercise from Earth, provided the strategic assessment that would reshape galactic military thinking. Ladies and gentlemen, what we've just witnessed is the birth of a new type of warfare. Human tactical innovation combined with coalition technology creates capabilities that neither side could achieve independently. The implications extended far beyond military applications. Coalition worlds that had spent centuries accepting their role as junior partners in the Galactic Order began requesting human military advisors. Species that had been conquered by the Coalition generations ago started questioning whether their integration had been as inevitable as they'd been told. Ambassador Velthari, now serving as the primary diplomatic liaison between Earth and Coalition Command, filed reports that painted a picture of a galaxy in transition. The humans haven't just joined the Coalition, they've fundamentally altered the balance of power throughout the galaxy. Other species are beginning to understand that technological superiority isn't the only path to military effectiveness. As the joint fleet returned to Coalition space, Admiral Catherine reflected on the changes that had occurred since that first exercise at Camp Pendleton. The humans had proven that a species armed with primitive weapons could defeat supposedly superior forces through tactical innovation and sheer determination. Now, armed with coalition technology, they represented a force that could potentially challenge any enemy in the galaxy. The age of human dominance in galactic affairs was just beginning, and the rest of the galaxy was beginning to understand that the small blue planet on the galaxy's rim had just changed the rules of interstellar warfare forever. Back on Earth, Military academies from every nation began receiving requests from coalition worlds for exchange programs and tactical consultations. The species that had once viewed humanity as primitive savages now sought to learn from the warriors who had proven that victory belonged not to those with the most advanced weapons, but to those who knew how to use whatever weapons they had with maximum effectiveness. Staff Sergeant Rivera, standing on the bridge of humanity's first starship, looked out at the vast expanse of space and smiled. The galaxy had underestimated Earth once. It wouldn't make that mistake again. 2 years after humanity's introduction to the galactic community, the emergency session of the Coalition High Council convened under circumstances that would have been unthinkable before Earth's integration. The hegemony, emboldened by 3 centuries of successful expansion, had launched their largest offensive in galactic history, striking simultaneously at 12 coalition worlds with a force that dwarfed anything previously encountered. Admiral Kethran stood before the assembled representatives of 47 species, his expression grim as he delivered the strategic assessment that had sent panic through Coalition Command. Colleagues, the hegemony assault represents an existential threat to Coalition survival. Their forces outnumber our available fleets by a factor of 20 to 1, and they've deployed weapon systems that our defensive technologies cannot counter. The holographic display showed the scope of the hegemony offensive in stark detail. Entire star systems burning under orbital bombardment. Coalition fleets shattered by enemy weapons that punched through energy shields like they were made of paper. Worlds that had known peace for millennia suddenly facing extinction. General Patricia Hawkins, now serving as Earth's representative to the Coalition Council, listened to the reports with the calm assessment of a professional warrior who had seen humanity's worst conflicts. The scale was larger, but the fundamental nature of the crisis was familiar to anyone who had studied human military history. "Admiral," she said when the briefing concluded, "what's the Coalition's current strategic assessment of our defensive capabilities?" Admiral Kethran's response painted a picture of inevitable defeat. "General, our computer projections indicate that Coalition forces can delay the hegemony advance but cannot stop it. At current rates of attrition, we estimate complete Coalition collapse within 18 months. The silence that followed was broken by Ambassador Velthari, whose diplomatic career had been transformed by her experiences with humanity. "Admiral, have these projections incorporated the tactical innovations developed through our joint operations with human forces?" "Ambassador," Admiral Kethran replied, "while human tactical methods have proven effective in limited engagements, the scale of the current crisis exceeds anything we've previously encountered. The hegemony is bringing overwhelming force to bear across multiple fronts simultaneously." General Hawkins stood, her movement commanding attention from every being in the chamber. "Admiral, with respect, I think you're making the same mistake your forces made during that first exercise with my Marines. You're assuming that superior numbers and technology guarantee victory." The general activated her personal display, showing tactical analyses that had been prepared by human military strategists working in conjunction with Coalition intelligence services. "The hegemony has spent 3 centuries learning to counter Coalition defensive strategies. They've developed weapons and tactics specifically designed to overwhelm your traditional approaches to warfare, but they've never faced an enemy that fights the way humans fight." Dr. Sarah Vance, now serving as Earth's chief military liaison, presented the strategic framework that would reshape the entire war effort. Members of the Council, human military doctrine is built around a simple principle. When facing a superior enemy, you don't fight them where they're strong. You force them to fight where they're weak. The plan that emerged from the emergency session was audacious in its scope and revolutionary in its approach. Instead of attempting to meet the hegemony assault with conventional defensive strategies, the Coalition would abandon traditional military doctrine entirely and embrace a form of warfare that had been perfected on the battlefields of Earth. Commander Thaxmore, whose military education had been fundamentally altered by his exposure to human tactics, outlined the operational framework. "We'll evacuate civilian populations from threatened worlds and convert our entire fleet structure into mobile strike forces. Instead of defending fixed positions, we'll attack hegemony supply lines, command centers, and strategic targets throughout their territory." The assembled alien representatives struggled to comprehend the implications of the proposal. For millennia, Coalition warfare had been based on the principle of technological superiority backed by defensive fortifications. The humans were suggesting that they abandon everything that had made the coalition successful and embrace a form of warfare that seemed to guarantee massive casualties. General Hawkins questioned council member Zarthek of the Centauri Alliance. You're proposing that we abandon our defended worlds and launch attacks deep into hegemony territory. How can this possibly succeed when conventional strategies have failed? General Hawkins' response drew on centuries of human military experience. Council member. Conventional strategies have failed because the hegemony has spent 300 years learning to counter them. They know exactly how coalition forces will respond to any given situation. They've built their entire military doctrine around defeating your traditional approaches. Staff Sergeant Rivera, now commanding the 1st Human-Trained Coalition Special Operations Unit, provided the tactical perspective that convinced the wavering council members. Sirs, the hegemony's strength comes from their ability to bring overwhelming force to bear against fixed positions, but their entire logistical and command structure depends on maintaining secure supply lines across vast distances. Human forces have been cutting enemy supply lines for thousands of years. The transformation of coalition military doctrine that followed was unprecedented in galactic history. Traditional battle fleets were broken down into smaller, more mobile units. Defensive installations were converted into forward operating bases for deep strike missions. Most importantly, coalition forces began training in tactics that emphasized mobility, deception, and attacking enemy weaknesses rather than strengths. The first major operation under the new doctrine took place in the Vega system, where a massive hegemony fleet was conducting orbital bombardment of coalition colonies. Instead of attempting to engage the enemy fleet directly, human-trained coalition forces struck the hegemony's fuel depot in the neighboring system, stranding their entire assault force without the resources needed to continue operations. Captain Morrison, now leading multi-species special operations teams throughout hegemony territory, reported results that exceeded even the most optimistic projections. Command Operation Silent Thunder achieved all primary objectives. Hegemony supply lines in Sectors 7 through 12 have been completely severed. Enemy forces are reporting critical shortages of fuel, ammunition, and replacement parts. The psychological impact of the new tactics proved as important as their material effects. The hegemony had built their military culture around the concept of overwhelming force deployed through predictable patterns. They had no experience dealing with an enemy that struck from unexpected directions using methods that seemed to violate every principle of civilized warfare. Corporal Johnson, leading deep penetration raids using coalition stealth technology, provided intelligence that revealed the true effectiveness of human tactical innovations. Enemy morale is collapsing across multiple fronts. Their commanders are reporting that they can't predict where the next attack will come from or what form it will take. Within 6 months of implementing human-inspired tactics, the coalition had not only stopped the hegemony advance, but had begun pushing enemy forces back across a front that spanned dozens of star systems. The species that had seemed invincible through 3 centuries of expansion found themselves fighting a type of war they didn't understand against an enemy that refused to engage them on their own terms. Admiral Keithran's final report to the Coalition Council marked the end of one era in Galactic history and the beginning of another. Members of the Council, I am pleased to report that hegemony forces have begun withdrawing from coalition territory. Their military leadership has requested negotiations for a permanent ceasefire. As peace returned to the galaxy, the other species of the coalition began to understand what humanity had brought to their community. It wasn't just tactical innovation or military expertise. It was a fundamental understanding that survival sometimes required the willingness to fight by any means necessary. General Hawkins, standing before the Council as the architect of coalition victory, delivered the assessment that would define humanity's role in galactic affairs for generations to come. Members of the Council, what we've learned over the past 2 years is that the galaxy is a dangerous place. There will always be threats that can't be defeated through diplomacy or deterred through shows of force. When those threats emerge, you need warriors who understand that winning isn't about having the best weapons. It's about using whatever weapons you have more effectively than your enemies. The silence that filled the council chamber was profound, broken finally by Admiral Catherine's simple acknowledgement. The Coalition owes humanity a debt that can never be fully repaid. You haven't just saved our worlds, you've taught us how to survive in a universe where strength alone isn't enough.